a remote hearing like this possible. My name is Charles Decker. I live in New Haven, where I represent Ward 9 on the New Haven Board of Alders. I'm Senior Research Analyst with Unite Here, as well as a member of the Recovery for All Coalition. I'm testifying in strong support of HB 6187 and SB 821, as well as SB 171. COVID has upended everybody's life for the past year, but the costs have not been borne equally. New reports in the New York Times and the Huffington Post last week reveal that Black and brown workers have been the first ones fired and the last ones hired during the pandemic. Unite Here represents workers in the hospitality industry. These workers are disproportionately Black and Latinx. Hospitality is one of the sectors with the greatest job loss. Those who were able to keep working are likelier to be on the front lines and exposed to the coronavirus. And we all know that communities of color have been the most devastated by death and serious illness from COVID-19. The gentleman, a couple people before me, gave you the figures about billionaires, so I'm going to skip that section, but I will emphasize that it is completely immoral that our state is set up such that billionaires can hoard more and more wealth while working people lose their wages and healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. It is completely immoral that redlining maps from the 1930s almost perfectly predict present-day poverty and foreclosures and asthma and violent crime and COVID-19 and almost any other bad outcome that you can think of. Now, it's clear that a recovery is on its way. I just read that we moved the vaccine schedule up today, which is excellent news. But we need a recovery for all. We need a fairer tax system that means billionaires cannot keep hoarding more and more while working people struggle to get by. We need robust public services so that working people can find decent housing and healthcare and transportation. We need direct aid to help people get back on their feet. We need other policies like worker recall so that the people of color who were the first to lose their jobs will not be the last to get them back. Back to normal is going to leave thousands and thousands of working people and people of color in our state behind. I urge this committee to support these bills and take bold action. I'm going to deviate a tiny bit from my written remarks, which have been submitted to the clerk, just to also say, I've heard a few wealthy people today say that Connecticut should be more like Florida in particular. Well, I spent most of the fall in Florida organizing alongside laid off hospitality workers to try to defeat Donald Trump. And while in Florida, I also volunteered at the food banks where some of those same workers got in lines at 3 or 4 in the morning, lines for food banks that stretched literally for miles and miles. Florida is not a place where they take care of their workers. And the idea that we should seek to emulate that is absurd to me. But thank you all for your service to the residents of Connecticut. Thank you for sticking with us for the long evening.
Thank you, Alder, and good to see you. Don't see any questions, but appreciate your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mike Pissarro. Mike, and if Mike is, oh, here he comes.
Hi, yes, apologize. My name is, I'm just ducking out of a city council meeting. My name is Michael Passero. I am very proud to be the mayor of the great city of New London. And first, I want to thank you, Representative Scanlon and Senator Fonfara for providing me this opportunity, along with the esteemed members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. So thank you. I did join you at the beginning at 9 o'clock this morning, so I have to congratulate your perseverance and your service throughout this long day. I came in on and off to hear some of the wonderful testimony, and I hope that mine will not repeat a lot of what you've heard, but I am here to testify on behalf of House Bill 6187 and Senate Bill 821. And I also want to proudly tell you that the City Council of the City of New London passed a resolution 2 weeks ago supporting these measures. These are appropriate means of raising revenue. I was really impressed with some of the ingenuity and really some of the equity and fairness that's involved in some of these measures. Connecticut is I believe, the second most racially segregated state in the nation, and maybe the most economically segregated state in this nation. A city like New London, where the median family income is $40,000. And I think you have to all stop and think about that for a minute, $40,000. And for our 50% of this city is Black and Latinx. And for that 50% of the city, the median family income is $30,000. So when you talk about a regressive tax structure in this state, These are the residents and these are our community members that suffer the most under that system. Of course, the coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated the economic divide in this country and especially in this state and really in my city. You can see these disparities here on every level. The pandemic has done nothing but drawn our attention to this. So we've struggled to ensure that our families have access to food. That you have to really think about. In America, we are distributing food like a third world country would in a famine. The difference is there's plenty of food here, but the families in my city just don't have enough money to buy it. And I think that's even worse than what they deal with in a third world country. So we have to ask where the money is. And that's what I like about these bills. We're asking you to pass some of these revenue measures to access some of that wealth that is disproportionately going to the highest earners.
30 seconds, Mayor, 30 seconds.
Yep, thank you for that. I'm going to wrap up there. I think you get the point. I want to thank also, though, the Recovery for All Coalition for the work they've done on this. And I want to thank all of you in this committee for considering these bold and very important initiatives. And thank you for allowing me this time. You'll be hearing from a city councilor a little later in the evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you. Thank you for being here today. I don't see any questions, but we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Next up, we have Kara O'Dwyer. Kara O'Dwyer. And if she's not ready, we have Beverly Brakeman.
Hi, good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Beverly Brakeman. I'm the director of UAW Region 9A, representing about 30,000 members in New England, New York City, and Puerto Rico. I'm not going to read all of my testimony. I have a few things I do want to say. I'm part of the Recovery for All Coalition. As representatives of the people who elected you, you must understand the important role government has to play in creating a fair and level playing field for all working families, and that taxes is not a bad word, but rather a mechanism for collective investment towards the betterment of all people. The governor's budget does not do this, so we are counting on you all to do the right thing. An example from my life is my ex-husband, someone I care deeply about and with whom I have 2 daughters. He teaches art to residents in nursing homes and abruptly lost his job even before March 18th, when nursing homes had to be closed indefinitely. From day one, he has not had a job, but has worked diligently to do other odd jobs, work intermittently, and find new ways to support himself and his wife. Yet at every turn, he is confronted by obstacles like a broken unemployment system that only works if you simply don't work at all, a mortgage company with whom he must fight every month for more time to get back on his feet, healthcare on the exchange whose deductible is now $4,000 just to be able to afford it during this time. And at a time when mental health services are more critical than ever, his doctor doesn't take insurance and he can't find another one, resulting in tremendous and untreated anxiety, depression, and fear. We are also fortunate that I have the means to financially support our 2 daughters because he cannot. And he is a white man, and I am a white woman of privilege, and I can help him. Like many in the labor movement, I am a fierce advocate who never takes no for an answer. As an elected leader of a labor union who has lobbied in this building for 20 years, I have power and political connections, and I'm not afraid to use them to help people. Power is a wasted commodity if not used to make change when change is needed. That being said, most people, in fact, hundreds of thousands of people living in our state have no resources, no advocates, little or no access to much needed technology to access resources, no time to stay on the phone for hours waiting for information about unemployment, healthcare, childcare, and are quite simply suffering unimaginably. These are the people that you, our state's representatives to and for the people, have a responsibility to care for and care about. You have an amazing opportunity to change tax policy and law in strategic ways that more fairly and justly raises more revenue from those who have it, to expand state services for those who do not. So we urge you tonight to do the right thing and not only pass these bills out of your committee, but push to get them through the House, the Senate, and to the governor's desk. and be prepared to override a veto if you need to. We are all counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Chairman. Beverly, I just want to thank you for being here despite the late hour, like all of us. And I really appreciate you sharing your personal story. And as someone who is a resident of my district, I know that you mean it when you say you're going to keep using your voice for change. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Seeing no further questions, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yep.
too.
Is Juana Valle available? And she needs an interpreter, I believe.
Hi, I will interpret. Juana Valle, ¿está presente? ¿Podría activar su micrófono?
Sí, estoy aquí.
Adelante.
Ok. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, miembros del Comité de Finanzas. Mi nombre es Juana Valle. Soy madre de 4 hijos. Yo vivo en New Haven desde hace 21 años y soy miembro de ULA.
Okay, una pausa. Good evening, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Juana Valle. I am a mother of 4 children. I have lived in New Haven for 21 years, and I am a member of ULA, Latinos United in Action. Adelante.
Soy miembro de ULA y de la Alianza de Trabajadoras del Hogar y de la Coalición de Recuperación para Todos.
I'm also part of the Domestic Workers Alliance and the Recovery for All Coalition.
Hoy quisiera dar mi testimonio a favor de los proyectos de ley 821 y 66187.
I'm giving my testimony in support of the bills 821 and 6187.
Porque necesitamos un presupuesto justo y digno para la gente trabajadora de este estado.
Because we need a budget that is fair and dignified for the working people of this state.
Perdí mi trabajo por culpa de la pandemia. Soy trabajadora del hogar y limpio casas.
I lost my job because of the pandemic. I am a domestic worker and I clean houses.
Mi esposo trabajaba en una pizzería, la cual se cerró y hasta hoy estamos esperando una recuperación económica.
My husband worked in a pizzeria which was shut down. It was closed. And to this day, we are waiting for an economic bailout.
Él hoy trabaja en una empacadora de carnes.
Today, he works in a meat packing plant.
Nosotros estamos sufriendo porque no nos alcanza el dinero para pagar la renta y los biles.
We're suffering because we don't have enough money to pay the rent and the bills.
Estamos en peligro de ser desalojados.
We're in danger of being evicted.
En plena pandemia, después de habernos contagiado del COVID-19, mi familia completa y yo, el dueño del apartamento nos subió $100 de renta.
In the middle of the pandemic, after my entire family and I were infected with COVID-19, the landlord raised our rent by $100.
30 seconds.
Le queda un minuto, Juana.
Y por miedo a ser desalojados, tuvimos que aceptar a pagarlo. Por 3 años, el dueño no quería reparar un hoyo grande que teníamos en el baño. Nos caía el agua del segundo piso al primer piso. Y hace un mes, John Jairo, pues habló sobre él habló por mí y hasta ahorita pues sí, los inspectores están tratando de ayudarme y el dueño me está tratando de ayudar un poco con componer el baño.
For fear of being evicted, we agreed to pay the extra rent, but Also, there was a big hole in the bathroom, which the landlord refused to fix for 3 years. Just a month ago, John at ULA helped me call the city inspectors, and finally, the landlord is starting to fix the problems.
Por eso les pido que por favor aprueben estos proyectos de ley, porque es necesario financiar las agencias municipales y estatales que defienden nuestros derechos básicos como el derecho a la vivienda segura.
That's why I ask you to pass these bills, because it's necessary to fund the municipal and state agencies that defend our basic rights, such as the right to safe housing.
También es muy importante financiar el seguro médico de Husky para todos las personas sin importar su estatus migratorio.
It's also very important to fund Husky health insurance for all people, regardless of immigrant status.
Mi esposo y yo estamos excluidos de Husky por nuestro estatus migratorio. Muchas veces no queremos ir a las emergencias por miedo de que pues realmente ahí vamos a tener que pagar la factura.
My husband and I are excluded from Husky because of our immigrant status. Many times we're afraid to go to the emergency room because afterwards we cannot pay the bills that arrive.
That is 5 minutes, just a FYI.
Juana, hay que ir concluyendo. Si puede llegar a la conclusión
Ok.
o resumir un poco.
El
Ujú.
solo hecho de entrar a emergencia significa que gastaremos $600 cuando uno gana por lo mucho $300 por semana. Si pagamos eso, ¿con qué vamos a comer? ¿Con qué vamos a pagar la renta y las utilidades?
So just going to the emergency room costs $600. If you earn $300 per week, then, and you pay the hospital bill, how will you eat? What will be left to pay the utilities and the rent? A concluir, Juana.
En este tiempo de pandemia, mi esposo se enfermó con COVID y todos entramos en cuarentena, aislada. Después me enfermé yo y de la segunda cuarentena y mi hija también. Después tuvimos que hacer otra cuarentena, 3 aislamientos completos, sin ganar un solo dólar.
In this pandemic, my husband got sick with COVID. We had to quarantine. Then I got sick. We did a second quarantine. Finally, my daughter got sick and we did 3 quarantines, 3 months of not earning $1.
No queremos ir al hospital porque sabemos que al salir del hospital, pues el bill que nos va a llegar va a ser caro. Y si no nos mató el COVID, pues nos va a matar la deuda que vamos a tener con el hospital.
And while we were sick, we did not want to go to the hospital to get help because we know that when we leave the hospital, if COVID doesn't kill us, then the hospital debt will kill us.
Por eso estoy levantando mi voz, porque todos tenemos derechos, tanto la gente indocumentada como la gente con estatus regular.
That's why I'm raising my voice, because we all have rights, both undocumented people and people with regular status.
Somos seres humanos, pagamos impuestos y tenemos derecho de tener un seguro médico y un techo, ya que es hora de tener justicia.
In the end, we're human beings. We pay taxes. We have a right to have medical insurance and a roof over our heads. It's a question of justice.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I really, really appreciate you sharing your story with us tonight.
Muchísimas gracias, Juana. Gracias por compartir su historia esta noche.
De nada. Muchísimas gracias a ustedes por escucharme.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Gracias por compartir.
Feliz noche. Thank you, Senator Scanlon.
Yep. Next up, we have Kara O'Dwyer.
Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Kara O'Dwyer, and I have been a personal care attendant, or PCA, for 6 years under various direct care waiver programs administered by the Department of Social Services and Department of Developmental Services. I've cared for 5 different consumers, people of varied age and disability. I love my job because I get to be the hands, the feet, the eyes, ears, and voices for the people in my care, and they become family to me. But as a PCA, I only make $16.25 an hour. We have no health benefits, no paid time off, no retirement benefits, and no job security. As a single mother working 2 jobs and living with my mother, who also works 2 jobs, including as a PCA, I still struggle to make ends meet. I'm actually interviewing this week for a 3rd job. It's obvious based on the governor's proposed budget that this administration doesn't see what workers like me go through. They don't see that we have to constantly make decisions about whether we can put food on the table or pay the rent, whether we can afford medication or electricity or heat. We're not even just living paycheck to paycheck. We're surviving barely a paycheck or 2 behind. If the state really valued our work, then we would have paid sick days and health insurance and all the other basic rights that would allow us to care for ourselves, our families, and our consumers. In order to raise our wages and give us the benefits we deserve, the state needs to pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187. We're currently in the midst of the greatest crisis in 100 years, and our governor proposes a budget that raises taxes on workers like me and worsens the inequality while protecting the ultra wealthy and allowing them to continue profiting. Again, you heard about all of the extreme wealth that they built.
30 seconds.
All right. In January 2021, 1 in 5 Connecticut adults with children said that their kids don't have enough food to eat. That's 20% of our kids. If we're not protecting our elderly, our disabled, and our children, then what are we fighting for? Long-term care workers like me and the people that we care for need to be fully supported and funded.
3 minutes.
And this can only be done if we have the courage to pass these bills and raise the taxes on the billionaires who already have enough, while the rest of us are struggling. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Dwyer, for being here tonight. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Cynthia Johnson. Cynthia Johnson.
I'm here. Good afternoon, good evening, Senator Farrar and other members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Johnson. My daughter, Anissa Johnson, is laying down right now. We live in New Haven, and I have worked for the last 5 years caring for my daughter as a personal care attendant as well. I love my daughter dearly and have cared for her entire life. However, a series of events that began in 2015 led me to become her PCA. My daughter Anissa lives with a rare case of epilepsy syndrome, which causes her seizures which causes a variety of seizures in her. One of which was known as drop seizures. In 2015, Anissa was walking to the store when she experienced a drop seizure and fell to the ground. When she hit the ground, she broke her jaw in 3 places. And the doctor said that she hit her mouth so hard, her teeth released from her gums. She didn't break her teeth. The teeth just released from her mouth. Recovering from her fall took 2 years. It was during this time that I discovered I needed to be her PCA. And the care was, it was difficult. The Medicaid waiver program stepped in for both of us. And if it hadn't been for that program, we would not have made it. But let me give you an update. In 2019, due to circumstances beyond our control, We were uprooted from the home that we had been living in since 2010. My daughter's, we lived at a hotel, and my daughter's seizures changed again to bilateral seizures. If any of you have children, you never want to see your child or any loved one go through one of the bilateral seizures. As my daughter has one of these bilateral seizures, it's as if she's conscious as she's having one. She starts screaming. She's feeling, it's like she feels everything. Her brain is actually awoke. And me as a parent, I could not do anything to help my child. I couldn't help her.
30 seconds, Miss Johnson, 30 seconds.
With a seizure, you can't stop it. It's already in process. Only thing you can do is try to comfort them. The PCA that was helping us had to comfort me because I froze up and I could not do anything. I cried while I watched my daughter suffering. The reason why this affects you all is because the PCA that was present that particular day was a professional. She stepped in and helped me and comforted my daughter. I would not have made it if it hadn't been for her. PCAs, nursing home workers, group home workers go to work every day to ensure and help the consumers, and we depend on them. Yet they are paid poverty wages, provided barely any benefits. They live from paycheck to paycheck, inadequate wages, and are not offered
3 minutes, 3 minutes.
and are we are not given any paid sick leave, any health insurance to fall back on if we get sick. That same PCA that helped me fell at another job and we lost her. She had been with us 3 years and she's no longer able to be with us because she did not have any sick pay or any benefits. She came through us through an agency, and any of the agencies, if you get sick, you lose that job. You are replaced immediately. And with the Medicaid waiver program is now being threatened because of the governor's budget. Without that Medicaid waiver program, me and my daughter and many like us, we are going to be lost completely. Connecticut is a great state. We came here from Georgia and Florida that don't even have the Medicaid waiver program.
Ms. Johnson, you hit your 3 minutes, but I just want to say thank you for sharing your family story with us. Thank you for what you're doing as a PCA, and we really appreciate you sticking it out with us tonight to share both of those experiences with us.
Thank you for listening.
Next up, we have Danielle Radu. If not, if Danielle is not here, we have Angela.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Angela Mealy. I'm with the Motion Picture Association of America. Thank you, co-chairs Fonfara and Scanlon and ranking members Cheeseman and Martin. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and probably one of the few testifying in opposition to 6187 and Senate Bill 821, which is a 10% tax on gross advertising revenues. And one of the things that we've had concerns with this, and some other states have introduced similar legislation, is we believe it's constitutionally suspect, would harm the Connecticut economy, especially an economy trying to recover from the pandemic. And one of the things that we see with respect to businesses coming back from pandemic is, as the retail group spoke earlier, they said online advertising was one of the keys to getting back business even during the pandemic. And not only that, but even when you have gross revenue tax on digital advertising services, we feel with respect to our members, it's discriminatory on streaming services, cable, satellite program services, broadcast network, and other programming. And one of the things that we see is it's really a hidden tax. And as the retail group alluded to earlier, it's going to be passed through and it's not going to be absorbed. And I know there was a question earlier with respect to Maryland and whether they felt that there yet. It is not, they actually pushed the effective date and the bill is being challenged in court. So I think that you will see that pass through, and it will not just stay with those companies that it's intended to impact. And one of the things that we've seen with respect to not only this type, but other advertising taxes that have been introduced around the country have all been repealed, and they've been rethinking how they want to tax advertising. And one of the things that we believe the unconstitutionality of this is much of it falls on out-of-state advertisers and out-of-state companies, and it's not taxing similarly in-state companies. And it's also not taxing any other means of transmission of advertising, only in the digital realm. And so for these reasons, mostly constitutional and violation of several clauses and potentially running afoul of the First Amendment, we respectfully urge the committee to reject these proposed measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Millet, for being here this evening. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Looks like
Appreciate it.
Danielle is back. Danielle?
I am. I apologize. I was skipped, but I would like an opportunity to address the committee if that's still an option.
You're up.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to speak a little bit about Senate Bill 171. And the first thing I wanted to indicate was that I am opposed, but I think that before there's any movement any further in this bill, one of my, I guess, more significant objections is that there's been so little publicity surrounding what's going on at the Capitol because of the pandemic. So, the Capitol is closed. I'm not quite sure why. The West Farms Mall is open and a lot of enormous venues. So I think that first off, if I had not seen an article in the paper, I saw one brief article in the Waterbury paper, which is my local paper, and I received an email, I think from the House Republicans, perhaps. I think there's probably a whole lot of people out there that aren't familiar with this bill and what's in it. So my first objection is that I think there needs to be a much greater public airing of all of these bills that are being considered. Secondly, on the specifics of Senate Bill 171, generally speaking, we think of taxes, I think, in two categories in this country and certainly in this state, right? We've got generally income taxes, and we all know what those are. And then we have our property taxes that we pay on our homes or our businesses or even our motor vehicles. But, Senate Bill 171, the subject of that is really neither of those things. It's a wealth tax. They may call it a mansion tax. I think that's a misnomer. It's really a tax on wealth because it's not a typical property tax where, we all know what that is, right? You move into a town, you know what the mill rate is, you pay your property taxes. And in theory, what you're paying is your fair share of the services that town is going to provide for you. So, your streets and your police and your emergency services and your plowing, and certainly your education is one of the biggest. But what this tax seeks to do is to tax on top of your typical property tax, but it amounts to a taxation without representation because that money isn't going to stay in the town in which the property is located. That is the subject of that tax. So it's going to go instead to this black hole in Hartford to be redistributed to, I guess, the larger cities and towns. It's really unfair in terms of people deciding where they want to live based on things like a mill rate when you then kind of pull a fast one on them and tax the fact that they bought a home that is assessed at over $300,000. Most people don't call a $430,000 home a mansion. Typically, if you have 3 children, it may mean that you're middle class, maybe it means you're upper middle class, but it also means that you're buying a house that's that size with money that has already been taxed. So now we're going to tax the income before you buy it. We're going to tax the property in the town, and then we're going to add an
30
extra.
seconds. 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. And so I think it ends up being punitive in a lot of respects. and you're punishing people who have worked hard, saved their money, decided to live in a smaller town, and are able to just get over that threshold for the valuation that the legislature has chosen. And again, I don't think it's a tax that it's one time. It's not going to go away. The income tax never did. And I think our government, unfortunately, has demonstrated that it doesn't typically do things that are reasonable with our tax dollars. It just goes into the abyss. And so those are the main reasons that I would suggest to you that this bill should not proceed any further. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Ratto. Senator Fanfara, followed by Representative Zupkis.
Quickly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Ratto. I just say that the fact that we don't allow towns at this point to tax property based on income is just sheerly that we don't do it. Doesn't mean we can't. And I could make the argument, and frankly have, that that is a fairer way of taxing. It's based on income rather than a value of property, which doesn't take into consideration one's ability to pay. And that's what this whole argument is about today, whether you agree with it or not. It's about one's ability to pay. And much of our tax structure does not recognize that. Sales tax does not recognize that. Property tax does not recognize that. So it's just a matter of what the legislature historically has done or not done.
Sure, but I don't necessarily agree that it's a discussion about one's ability to pay. I mean, that's never been the basis of taxes, right? That's a socialistic approach to taxes. One's ability to pay shouldn't be the sole, mover of what one is required to pay, right? Because that doesn't take into account people's ability to earn money. It only takes into account whether or not they choose to earn money. So whether or not that's equitable is a discussion, I guess, for another day, but I would respectfully disagree.
I didn't follow that, but that's okay. It's late. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Zupkis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Danielle. It's nice to see you here, and I thank you for coming and testifying tonight. I agree with you 100%. You know, we live in a small town that is not a wealthy town. It's not in Fairfield County. It's in the middle of Connecticut, right by a big city. And as you know, we can guarantee everyone in the legislature that we don't get nearly the amount of money that cities get. And so I agree with you about this just being another tax and another tax. And I had made a point earlier that people don't mind paying their fair share. But what happens is it's not just this tax. It's going to be another tax coming and another tax coming and another tax coming. And you're right, it goes to Hartford. And then where the money is supposed to stay, it never stays in those spots. So I appreciate you coming. And if there's anything else you would like to share, please feel free to do so before you leave.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure I'm unmuted. I am. Thank you so much, Rep. Zupkis. And I appreciate all the work that you do for our small town. And I echo the sentiment, we live in this small town. I live next door to a farm here in Prospect. I love it. I moved here for the tranquility. I moved out of a big city, born and raised in Waterbury. I still operate a business in the city of Waterbury. But frankly, I was no longer willing to pay the taxes to the city of Waterbury that I wasn't seeing any benefit of, because I think that ultimately what we see is taxation in theory is supposed to be equitable. And that's the new buzzword, right, is equity. And yet I don't know how you can make a case that is equitable to continue to take more and more money from the people who live in the small towns, send it up to Hartford. And then when it's time to get the small town share back, it is significantly less money than the small town individuals sent out. And now what we're looking to do is just increase that debt service of these small towns exponentially, again, into this black hole that we call Hartford. And it's easy to be a little cavalier about talking about this discussion is about what's fair and who makes what income. But quite frankly, it isn't fair to simply take people's money because they work hard and earn it. That isn't equitable in
Thank
any
you,
regard.
Mrs. Rado. We appreciate your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you.
You as well.
Next
Thanks,
up, we have
Tom.
Georgia Davis. Ms. Davis. If she is not here, we have Rob Baril. I see Rob here.
Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and members of the committee. I'm Rob Baril, President of District 1199 SEIU. We represent 25,000 healthcare workers across hospitals, long-term care, state public sector healthcare workers, nursing homes, and group homes. And I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187.
Whoop, we lost you there.
I'm
Rob.
back.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The last year has obviously been a year of incredible crisis between the recession, the opioid addiction, and the pandemic. Our members have been through some of the most difficult environments imaginable in caring for the sick and the ill. They've risen to the occasion and given everything that they have had asked of them. Even when PPE were in such short supply that workers had to wear garbage bags to be able to take care of their patients. To date, 22 members of our union have lost their lives while fighting the pandemic. And folks in our union who generally care for Medicaid patients are almost entirely dependent upon public dollars. That's speaking just of our membership of 25,000. But of course, if we think out beyond into other segments of the working class, we know that many people are suffering in just as deep a way. 50% of Black and Latino men are 50% more likely to suffer unemployment than their white counterparts. Black unemployment is at 10%. 1 in 4 children in Connecticut is hungry. There have been 7,600 fatalities, but also an uncounted number of increases in anxiety and depression disorders. Suicide is up 13% in the past calendar year. And there is just tremendous suffering across the state. And that is to say that that is the case even when before this pandemic, in many parts of the state, things were already extremely difficult.
Seconds, Rob.
Connecticut being the most unequal state in terms of income distribution in the country. We're asking the committee to ask the one group in our society that has not sacrificed to actually make a contribution to supporting the rest of the people in the state of Connecticut. Connecticut's 17 billionaires are now collectively almost $4 billion wealthier than they were on March 1st of last year. And we're asking for a long-term structural fix to move Connecticut away from its structural, racial, and economic inequality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brill.
Yep. Next up, we have right on time. Candace Carlson.
Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and members of the committee. My name is Candace Carlson, and I have been employed by DDS as a caseworker in the Individual Home Supports Program for over 27 years. I am testifying and advocating today on behalf of our voiceless individuals statewide that do not have the ability and/or the means to advocate for themselves. I am also here to support Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187 so that we can raise revenue to fund the expansion of the DDS respite services that are so desperately needed to help provide essential services for individuals with IDD and their families. I'd also like to speak to the need to staff agencies like DDS and DEMIS. These agencies are consistently underfunded and understaffed in an effort to save money. The COVID pandemic has exposed and exacerbated this systematic pattern of unsafe staffing levels statewide throughout all agencies. The combination of unsafe staffing and lack of quality resources during COVID has cost individuals and employees their lives. That is very concerning, certainly not just as a caseworker, not just as a taxpayer in Connecticut, but as a woman with a moral meter. It's very concerning. Our Connecticut residents who have intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, and mental illnesses, and their families deserve so much better. This insatiable cycle has to change, and each one of you can help. Each and every one of you can demand that our most vulnerable statewide are provided with the highest quality of care. Respite services are much needed throughout the state to help provide essential services for individuals with IDD and their families. Once again, I respectfully ask that this committee help support and fund our Connecticut state agencies that are designed to help our most needy statewide. Specifically, I am asking that you expand revenue in Connecticut so that we can expand respite services within DDS and can fund our agencies to the levels that are needed to staff them adequately. Please pass Senate Bill
30 seconds, Ms. Carlson.
Please pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187. Thank you all for all that you do, and thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson.
Next up, we have, sorry, jumping around here, Laurice Brown, Ms. Brown. Laurice Brown,
Yes. Can you hear me?
we can.
Okay. Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Laurice Brown, and I'm an LPN at Manson Youth Institution in Cheshire. I've worked at Manson Youth for 5 years and DOC for 15 years. Even though it can be stressful, I honestly enjoy my job, caring for my patients. I'm testifying today to urge the committee to pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187. We must commit to raising revenue and rejecting the $1.3 million in cuts that the governor has proposed to inmate medical services in the DOC budget. We must instead increase funding and invest $15 million in workers like me. My coworkers and I have worked hard to keep our patients healthy and alive during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we were already working short-staffed. We came before this committee in 2019 to ask for increased funding for inmate medical services. Here we are again in 2021, still asking for the same thing. If you add in the pandemic and the governor's proposed $1.3 million in cuts to inmate medical services, you put our patients at increased risk for medical errors due to overworked staff, being tired from constant mandated overtime, and you continue to have a lack of adequate preventive and rehabilitative care that can reduce recidivism. I myself was mandated every day that I reported to work the entire month of December 2020 and the beginning of January of this year. I was not alone. If you do not prevent these cuts, matters are only going to get worse for me, my coworkers, and the patients that we work so hard for. For example, it's hard to get needed supplies to care for our patients. With the proposed budget cuts, it will be even more difficult. At Manson Youth, where I work, there have been times that I have worked alone due to short staff. Other times, Manson's Health Services Unit has had to be shut down overnight because we just did not have the needed staffing. Each time that our Health Services Unit has had to be shut down, this put our patients in danger. I know that my coworkers and I do not want to continue seeing our patients at risk. Hiring more staff by investing $15 million in inmate medical services would help to expand preventive care for inmates, create a safer environment for staff, and produce healthier communities for all of us. But we can only do that if you have the courage to pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187 and raise revenue. Help workers like me so we can give the care we want to be able to give. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Next up, we have Virginia Harger. Virginia?
Hello. Good evening. Good evening, co-chairs, ranking members, vice chairs, and remaining members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. I'm Virginia Harger, a resident of the city of Shelton for over 65 years, an elected member of Shelton's Planning and Zoning Commission since 2005, and its chair since December 2017. My comments today concern proposed Senate Bills 171, 172, 821, and proposed House Bill 6187. My first comments are my personal comments as a resident of the state. I'm not in favor of any portion of the bills which seek to establish a statewide tax on real property, a statewide monetary assessment to encourage affordable housing, and a 2% state property tax on the portion of assessed value of over 1.5 million of any owner-occupied residential real property. Connecticut residents are already overtaxed, and these proposals will only add to their burden. And now, as a member of Planning and Zoning, the purpose of Senate Bill 172 is to encourage affordable housing in the state. State legislators really want to improve housing opportunities and provide for the creation of more affordable housing units. I would suggest that the 40-year deed restriction be revoked or at least reduced to a more manageable set aside, such as 10 years. If you in your personal life wanted to make an investment, would you consider a program that does not permit you to fully receive the benefits of your investment for 40 years? I do not think so. Keeping a 40-year deed restriction gives developers little or no incentive to include affordable housing in any new housing proposals. I respectfully request that at the proper time, members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee vote to reject proposed Senate Bills 171, 172, 821, and proposed House Bill 6187. Thank you for your time and attention to my concerns.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for being here tonight.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have Wynn McDaniel. Wynn McDaniel.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. And good evening, committee members. I've been on since about 9, off and on, and I wanted to thank you for having this public forum and thank you for your service. My name is Wynn McDaniel. I'm a lifelong resident of Connecticut. I am Representative Aurora's 906th constituent. I am an elected member of the Representative Town Committee and chair of our district, but I am speaking to you as an individual. I strongly oppose Senate Bill 171, seeking additional state taxes on properties over $300,000. While I live in what would be considered one of the wealthy towns in Connecticut, I live on a fixed income as I retired last year. I have decided to remain in town as my children were both born in this town and went to school here and we are all very involved in our community. I cannot afford any additional taxes, and I know I am not alone in this regard. There are a lot of people in my town who are not millionaires. They do not live in mansions. Many have lost their jobs, are having difficulty making ends meet, and live on fixed incomes like myself. I urge you to oppose Senate Bill 171. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. McDaniel.
Next up, is Judith Paz available? I just received an email that she is ready. I'm not sure if she can hear us.
Judith Paz. ¿Podría activar su micrófono, Abigail? Abigail, activa su micrófono.
That was her for a second.
Abigail, ¿podría activar su micrófono?
Ahí está. ¿Sí me escuchan?
Sí, adelante.
Ok. Buenas noches, miembros del Comité de Finanzas. Soy soy residente de New Haven. Soy miembro de ULA y de la Alianza de Trabajadoras del Hogar y la Coalición de Recuperación para Todos. Quisiera hoy...
Good evening, honorable members of the committee. I'm a New Haven resident, a member of ULA, a member of the Domestic Worker Alliance, and Recovery for All.
Quisiera hoy dar mi testimonio a favor del rescate económico para la gente trabajadora como yo, a favor de los proyectos de ley HB 6187 y SB 821.
I would like to give my testimony tonight in favor of an economic bailout for working people like me. Please support HB 6187 and SB 821.
Yo soy madre soltera, yo gano el salario mínimo y el salario mínimo no me alcanza para solventar los gastos. Tengo 2 hijos, uno que nació aquí y una hija que no nació aquí. Ella vino cuando tenía 7 años y por ser mi hija inmigrante, ella está excluido del seguro médico, Husky. Tengo que pagar por todos los servicios como exámenes físicos de cada año, cita dental, vacunas. Al igual que todos ustedes, pago impuestos y no me parece justo que yo no pueda o mi hija pueda recibir el beneficio de salud.
Okay, una pausa. I am a single mom. I earn minimum wage and it's not enough to cover expenses. I have 2 children. My son was born here and my daughter came here when she was 7 years old. And my daughter, because she's an immigrant, is excluded from Husky health insurance. I have to pay for everything, the annual checkup, the dental appointment, the vaccinations. And I pay taxes just like you, and it doesn't seem fair to me that my daughter is excluded.
Les solicito a ustedes que aprueben estos proyectos de ley que son muy importantes para nosotros. No es urgente que ustedes aprueben estos proyectos de ley para todos y para la protección de los trabajadores esenciales como yo. Yo soy trabajadora del hogar, trabajo para una persona que me emplea en su empresa de limpieza de casas. Todos los días entro a las 8 de la mañana, pero no tengo hora de salida. Básicamente nos paga el sueldo mínimo y hay veces que trabajamos más de las 40 horas y ese trabajo extra no nos es pago.
So I'm urging you to pass these bills because the state could fund protections for essential workers like me. I'm a domestic worker. I work for a lady who employs me in her house cleaning company. Every day I start work before 8 o'clock in the morning. There's no regular time to end the workday. Basically, I earn the minimum wage. There are times when I work more than 40 hours a week, but I do not receive the overtime pay.
Hay veces que trabajamos todo el día completo y trabajamos muy rápido y duro con tal de llegar temprano a casa para ver a nuestros hijos. Eso significa que un trabajo de 6 a 8 horas lo tenemos que hacer en menos de 4 horas. Así que terminamos rendidas. No tenemos ni un momento de break algunas veces, ni siquiera tiempo para comer o tomar algo. El tiempo de descanso terminamos regalando a la señora.
Sometimes we work all day long. We work fast and hard to get home to see our children. Le queda como 60 segundos. That means that we have to do a job of 8 hours in less than 4 hours, and we end the day exhausted. We don't have a minute of break, not to eat or drink something. We end up giving our break time to the employer.
Ustedes pueden cambiar nuestra realidad esclavizante para que sigamos de pie en lucha para hacer valer nuestros derechos como mujeres trabajadoras del hogar. Al final todos somos humanos como ustedes y por favor pueden aprobar esta ley por nosotros.
So to conclude, you have the power to change our enslaving reality so that we can continue fighting to assert our rights as women and as domestic workers. In the end, we are human beings as well as you, honorable legislators. Please support these bills for us. Thank you.
Next up, we have John Brady.
Good evening, Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is John Brady. I'm the Executive Vice President of AFT Connecticut, a union of healthcare, education, and public service members. AFT Connecticut is a member of the Recovery for All Coalition. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony in strong support of SB 821 and HB 6187. I speak to you today as a registered nurse and representative of 30,000 dedicated members who educate our children, care for our patients, and provide vital public services to all Connecticut residents. I have submitted written testimony. Let me summarize a couple of points. These bills will provide relief to low and middle income taxpayers while asking those who have benefited financially to contribute a fair share. They will allow Connecticut residents to reduce the disparity that often comes because of one's zip code. And they will allow us to properly fund public education, affordable housing, healthcare, and infrastructure. We've heard that if we raise taxes on the rich, they will leave the state. However, Connecticut's own Ray Dalio, when asked on 60 Minutes, so should taxes on people like you be raised? Responded, of course, one way or another. The important thing is to take those tax dollars and make them productive. The three pandemics of healthcare, racial disparity, and the economy have pulled back the curtain on the inequities in our society. The time to address them is now, and these bills are a part of that process. Thank you again for this opportunity to address you. Thank you so much for the service that you provide to the people of the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. I see no questions.
Yep, next up, we have Andrea Barker. Andrea.
Oh, hold on a second.
There she is.
Hello,
Hi, Ms.
everyone.
Barker.
Yes, hi. Senator, sorry. I apologize. Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Barker, and I am a respite supervisor in the public sector of the Department of Developmental Services, also known as DDS Individual Family Support Division. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187. I'm an essential long-term care worker, and I'm here to say that essential workers go above and beyond their expectations with dedication, loyalty, and passion. And long-term care workers are here working at a hectic pace during a hectic time. We deserve to be heard. Passing these two bills would raise revenue in Connecticut, revenue that could be used to support essential workers and the people that we give care to. For instance, expansion of DDS respite centers. When the demands of being a caregiver to a family member with a disability postpones routine activities, whether they be personal, social, or urgent, respite centers offer planned and scheduled relief. Consequently, a planned and scheduled stay cannot be guaranteed more than twice a year. If resources permit, respite also serves CTH providers who care for individuals with disabilities, as well as eligible DCF foster families. A family or provider's choice to care for their loved one at home saves the Connecticut a lot of money in overhead and resources. According to the March 2017 DDS Management Information Report, 16,885 individuals in Connecticut are eligible for DDS. 66% of those eligible live at home with or without supports. The answer to support these families should be to open up at least 3 respite centers a year. Respite saves and supports these families by offering them an ability to rely on an outside program for temporary relief from the strenuous demands of being a caregiver. At this juncture, there are only 13 respite centers in the state of Connecticut. This means that thousands of families of the 66 eligible who live at home are impacted and do not have adequate relief from their demanding lives. Passing Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187 would mean we would be able to fund these respites because we know they are so important and significantly valuable to these families. DDS needs to consistently create at least 3 additional respites per year in the best interest of these families and individuals. Please pass these bills. Thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. I see no questions.
Yeah. Next up, we have James Burke.
Mr. Burke?
Yes, thank you very much, Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon. My name is James Burke. I am a city councilor of the city of New London, Connecticut. I believe Mayor Passero spoke to you earlier this evening. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of SB 821 and HB 6187. 2 weeks ago today, the City Council of New London passed a resolution unanimously. So I'd like to just take a moment to read from the resolution, which states, whereas the City of New London is a growing and prospering city with a culturally diverse population that has many great things to offer, good jobs, educational opportunities. Despite those opportunities, the City of New London is still facing many challenges, like overcrowded classrooms, an affordable housing crisis, lack of adequate service for mental health, healthcare, reentry supports, and many other things. And whereas the City of New London requires municipal taxes to help support municipal government and services, but is largely reliant on state support for funding many of the services and programs that care for our residents. The City of New London recognizes that the tax code is as much an expression of our values as the public goods and services we choose to fund with the resulting revenue. Whereas in Connecticut currently, the bottom 50% of taxpayers pay an effective tax rate that is 3 times more than the top 1%. And we currently have lower rates on the top brackets than our neighbors in New York and New Jersey. In addition, Connecticut's billionaires have increased their wealth by $3.6 billion since March 2020. Our state and local governments have been unduly and unnecessarily reliant on sales tax, property tax, business and occupational tax, and other regressive taxes. And whereas our upside-down tax system deepens poverty, diminishes opportunity for low and middle-class families, disproportionately harms communities of color, hinders efforts towards establishing a more equitable state, and protects and reinforces the privilege of the wealthy. And whereas the City of New London recognizes that the biennial budget and revenue packages of the state of Connecticut are expressions of these morals, values, and the priorities of our state. The governor's proposed budget skimps on municipal aid and does not prioritize equity for all citizens in all cities and towns. And whereas an October 2018 poll commissioned by Sacred Heart University and Hearst Connecticut Media Group found that almost 2/3 of Connecticut voters supported raising income taxes on millionaires to balance the state budget if cuts to services can't do the job. And finally, whereas the City of New London supports SB 821 and HB 6187 and their efforts to equalize the state tax code.
30 seconds.
Thank you. The City of New London thinks that revenue from such a systemic change in taxation could be dedicated to lowering the property tax burden and the impact of other regressive taxes, provide and expand public services, including housing, mental health, education, healthcare, and transit, creating green jobs and meeting carbon reduction goals. And in my final few seconds, it's thank you very much. I know it's been a very long day, but all of my constituents where the median income is below $40,000 would be greatly benefited if this legislation comes out of committee and is signed into law. So I thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Yep. Next up, we have Stephanie Du.
Stephanie here.
D-O. Looks like she's getting ready.
There you are.
Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine, Stephanie.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Chair Fonfara and Chair Scanlon, members of the committee. Thank you for your service and hanging in there on a very long day, and for the opportunity to testify on HB 6187 and SB 821. My name is Stephanie Doe. I'm a senior tax counsel at the Council on State Taxation. We are a nonprofit trade association based in Washington, D.C. with an independent membership of over 500 multi-jurisdictional corporations, many of which engage in business in Connecticut. My testimony is limited to our opposition to a tax on digital advertising services revenue. You have my written testimony, so I'd like to use my time to just focus on the origins of this tax and why it does not translate to a good tax for Connecticut. This kind of tax is generally designed to replicate taxes such as the French digital services tax. It has been adopted by foreign countries as a temporary fix to a problem that Connecticut does not have. So what's the problem? In these countries, these businesses and their activities are generally not subject to corporate income tax. That's because those countries have physical presence standards and income producing activity rules. So an out-of-state business without any physical presence and or significant cost to generating those activities in those countries are precluded from being taxed under those corporate income taxes. So to temporarily fix that, these taxes attempt to capture those activities until the OECD reaches a framework and agreement to address these digital businesses. So why is that not a problem in Connecticut? Many of these companies are already subject to Connecticut's corporation business tax. Connecticut's corporation business tax applies an economic nexus standard if a company has at least $500,000 in Connecticut receipts within a year. This gives Connecticut expansive jurisdiction to tax without the limits of physical presence. Connecticut then broadly sources and apportions that business's income into Connecticut through its market-based sourcing rules and single sales factor apportionment formula. Now, this is where I hope to bring you full circle. I mentioned internationally, these kinds of taxes serve as a stopgap measure until the OECD reaches an agreement. That project, known as Pillar 1, is proposing to move away from jurisdiction based on physical presence and also move towards market-based sourcing, which is precisely where Connecticut is already at. As a result, we believe in Connecticut, these kinds of taxes are a solution chasing a problem that doesn't
30
exist.
seconds, Stephanie.
I'm
30
happy
seconds.
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Doe. Tom?
Yep. Ellie Vandermark, followed by Randy Collins.
Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and distinguished members of the committee. Your stamina is impressive tonight, and mine might not be. My name is Elle Vandermark, and I'm here to thank you for your bold work in House Bill 6187 and Senate Bill 821. But I'm also asking you to be even more courageous and fund a recovery for all. We need progressive taxation, but we cannot stop there. We have to think boldly and look to raising revenue. We need fair taxation, and that means the wealthy must pay their fair share. Having more money does not mean you earned it. Having more money does mean you have access to power, protection, and privilege. Earlier this evening, we learned a healthy business environment, well-funded education, and vibrant communities are the issues that matter to investors, and a recovery for all contributes to all of these. The wealthy can afford to pay more, but middle and low wage earners already pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. Corporations can pay more, but workers living paycheck to paycheck cannot. Workers who are, more often than not, people of color or immigrants, these are the men and women who have built America. For all of American history, the dirtiest, most laborious, and dangerous jobs have been relegated to people of color and immigrants, those who have also had the least access to power, the fewest protections. Today, those jobs are done by essential workers. Importantly, today we define essential workers differently than we did just 1 year ago. It is time to recognize the essential role low-wage workers have in all our lives and pass a budget that recognizes a recovery for all. Essential workers need to earn a living wage, have health care, and have stable and safe housing. Last week, the Washington Post reported the wealth of the country's top 9 titans increased more than $360 billion in the last year. Unless we think this is an outlier, during the Great Recession, billionaires' wealth rose 85%. During that same time in America, 1 in 5 Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their dignity. In Connecticut, during the first 3 months of the pandemic, 14 Connecticut billionaires increased their net worth $2.4 billion.
30 seconds, 30 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Those at the top must pay their fair share to take care of our essential workers. A recovery for all will begin that work. I am a member of the 4 Cs, SEIU Local 1973, and I'm here humbly asking you to think boldly, to invest in the future of those who saw us through the pandemic, plan for equitable pre-K public education, robust public colleges and universities, access to affordable healthcare, and prioritize affordable housing. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Vandermark. Tom?
Yep. Randy Collins?
Good evening, members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Randy Collins. I'm Advocacy Manager with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Here today, I've submitted written testimony, so I will be very brief because I know the hour is getting long. Here today, quickly in opposition to Senate Bill 161, an act concerning a property tax exemption for the Connecticut Institute for the Blind. CCM opposes expanding this existing property tax exemption. As the bill is proposed, it would expand the language to any property or owned by any affiliates or subsidiaries of the Connecticut Institute for the Blind. We don't even know what the scope of this bill would be or the impact of municipalities. Also, this would grant the Connecticut Institute for the Blind a tax exemption that no other entity has because it would not provide the property tax exemption based on use, just simply based on the ownership. We do support Senate Bill 742, an act concerning the municipal revenue sharing account. This would be, when it was passed, it was one of the first times that we were going to see a direct sales tax sharing program with the state. Unfortunately, that has not been funded. The governor's budget has delayed that another 2 years, but that revenue would be $377 million needed by towns and cities. CCM, we're also here to oppose Senate Bill 171, 172, and portions of 6178 and 812 that would create a statewide property tax. Money collected from that would be deposited into the general fund. CCM's long argued that property tax is extremely regressive. We don't feel that adding to that property tax would be the best way to reform the system. We do argue loudly and often that we do need property tax reform. We look forward to working with the committee, but the idea of the state, municipalities' only form of revenue being sent to the state on a hope that it will come back is something that causes significant concern among CCM members, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Randy. Seeing no questions.
Yep. Next up, we have Jamie Lawfelm. Jamie, and if not Jamie, we have Rochelle. Oh,
I'm here.
Okay.
Jamie.
Yep. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Jamie Lofhelm. I'm a licensed professional counselor, licensed alcohol and drug counselor with the state of Connecticut Department of Correction. I was asked to speak a little about my experience during working during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Working during the COVID pandemic has been a deeply emotional and surreal experience, to say the least. To share a little about myself, I do take care of my elderly mother who moved into my home about 3 years ago. She has a heart condition. I would walk into work during the pandemic and ask myself, is today the day I'm going to expose my mother? Is today the day that I could possibly pass this deadly virus on to my mom? At one point, we had over 150 patients at my facility who were COVID positive, and that doesn't speak to the staff members. Every single person on my team, as far as staff, had become infected with COVID-19. I would walk into work every day to hear that another one of my colleagues was out sick. This was not only disturbing and overwhelming, but downright scary. To this date, I am the only person on my mental health team who has dodged the COVID bullet. At one point, out of 6 mental health clinicians, I was the only one reporting to work, the only person on my team who had not contracted COVID. My colleagues were out for weeks recovering, and I was working alone. I think that we are all heroes, every single one of us in the private and public sector, every single person who showed up to work during the pandemic and putting their patients' needs ahead of concern for their families. These are the heroes during the pandemic, and I think we should be compensated with hero pay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jamie. Tom?
Next up, we have Rochelle.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Rochelle.
Great. Good night, everyone. Good night, Senator. Absolutely. Good night, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scanlon, and the distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thank you all for your service and for hanging in there with us tonight. My name is Rochelle Palachi, and I'm the Connecticut State Director of SEIU, Local 32BJ. 32BJ represents 4,500 men and women in the state of Connecticut and 175,000 members up and down the East Coast. Our members form the backbone of the service industry, building service workers, security officers, early childhood personnel, and office, school, theater, stadium, and window cleaners. We're also proud members of the Recovery for All Coalition. I'm testifying in strong support of HB 6187 and SB 821. This year has been a painful struggle for so many Connecticut families, and particularly our SEIU members. Like many others, our hardworking members who are mostly Black and Brown have been deemed essential and risked life and limb to keep our state running during this pandemic. The COVID pandemic has further exposed Connecticut's deep economic disparities and pushed many to the brink of desperation. The scale of this crisis demands a bold response. People are suffering, and our state has a responsibility to meet our needs. More than 15,000 families are in danger of eviction and have requested renters assistance. 1 in 5 Connecticut adults with children said their children don't have enough food to eat. More than 200,000 without health insurance, and that was before the pandemic. Just like the federal level, now is a time for bold, big action. Now is the time for the state to step up with a robust economic recovery. We must build back better than before. Connecticut is one of the richest states in the nation, but leads in income and wealth inequality. We see severe racial inequality in income, wealth, housing, education, healthcare, and health outcomes, access to public services, and in the uneven toll of the pandemic. Our extreme inequality is a major obstacle to sustainable, inclusive economic growth. We can level the playing field by making the bold investments we need in essential public services, education, healthcare, housing, and municipal aid. We are strongly supporting these bills, and we ask that you stand with our state's working families by passing House Bill 6187 and SB 821. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you for your testimony.
Darnell Ford.
Mr. Ford. You're on mute, sir.
Is he trying to talk? Do you see him?
Sorry about
Oh,
that,
there he is.
late night. It's been
Quite
a
all
long
right.
day.
Quite all right.
Good evening, Senator Fonfair, Representative Scallion, and members of the committee. My name is Darnell Ford. I serve as city councilman on the Middletown Council, where I'm chair of the Public Safety Committee. I also am a proud District 1199 delegate. I work at the Solnit Center, Children's Psychiatric Center. I've been a lead CSW worker there for the last 22 years. I work with children who need support and services for their mental health and their families, where they're at their most vulnerable point right now, especially during the pandemic. Today, I'm here to support the passage for Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187 in both my capacities, because we need the revenue to expand long-term DCF services, other crucial services long-term in our communities. We shouldn't have to demand this funding, but unfortunately, from what I see and every day and when I work as a hero or as an essential worker, these should be foundational standards. Earlier today, I heard someone say, yeah, we know about DCF. It's standard that they come up with the cuts. That, it's what the trouble that DCF has every year when we talk about budgeting. It's not a DCF problem. It's a family problem, right? It's a child problem. These are services that should be fundamentally for these families, for these children. What I see consistently and firsthand, and what I hear is called the prison pipeline, which particularly impacts the Black and Brown communities, especially kids like my nephew. So he'll leave elementary school and has a higher chance of going down that pipeline because of the color of his skin. Our society is not paying attention. We're not doing what we need to do to be able to support a child in their most vulnerable needs during the time when they're in elementary school, or if they do, it's done in a way that doesn't make sense. So later on down the road, as he becomes a young adult, he'll wind up in jail. This is unacceptable. You can't call me a hero. You can't call me an essential worker, especially at times like this when I feel completely helpless. We need to turn around what we're doing and what we're saying right now. It's not too expensive to be able to expand these services. And I don't mean just the Band-Aid for what's going on this year. It has to be long-term. I can't sit idly by and say that this is what is the only thing that we need to do. We're one of the wealthiest states in this nation. We need to be able to have the courage to stand up for exactly what our children and family need long-term.
30 seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
Expand the safety net. It's critical right now. It was critical back then, 22 years ago when I started, 35 years ago when I started in this field. It is more than critical now. You have people, you've heard all night tonight, people trying to survive, trying to figure it out. And right now we're having conversations on whether there's enough funding, enough services for people to be able to survive. We know what to do. I need you to have the courage to be able to do it. You need to pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yep.
Tom.
Yes, Craig Smith, followed by Andrea Flamio.
Mr. Smith.
Good evening, Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, Ranking Members Martin and Cheeseman, and members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Craig Smith, and I live in Ellington. On behalf of the United Auto Workers Local 376 and the Recovery for All Coalition, I am testifying in support of HB 6187 and SB 821. I am the president of UAW Local 376. We represent paraprofessional workers in Plymouth and Stratford, in addition to secretarial and cafeteria workers in those school systems. We also represent every early childhood education workers in Stamford and Hartford, amongst others. We represent private sector workers throughout Connecticut in manufacturing, food service, and the nonprofit world. Our members have suffered through a most terrible year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but they also realize that there are a lot of people worse off than them. However, I get many questions from my members. They see services getting cut, coworkers, family, friends, and neighbors are having their hours cut and being laid off, and the state government isn't doing enough to help. They know that 200,000 people don't have health insurance, and 1 in 5 families in Connecticut don't have enough food to feed their children. They also know that 15,000 families are in danger of eviction. Some of them may be them, and they don't know if they'll have representation in the housing court. They want to know where they can turn to for help for depression, anxiety, and addiction services that are surging because of the pandemic. If we want to grow our economy, and acting an austerity budget is the absolute worst thing we can do. Connecticut was one of the states that cut their public sector workforce the most in 2008, and we suffered one of the slowest private sector growth rates. We need to invest in our state and local governments, which will in turn bolster our private sector job creation. These bills are narrowly focused on establishing fairness to the tax code, funding essential services, and jumpstarting our economic recovery. We don't need 30-year tax breaks for financial industry data centers. We need funding
30
for
seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
healthcare, job training, primary and secondary education, and the rest. It's just plain wrong when someone making less than $53,000 a year has an effective tax rate more than 3 times that of someone making over $680,000. Building more equitable, just, and thriving communities is hard. Investment is needed to build a better Connecticut, not just for now, but for the years to come. Please show the political will and courage to pass HB 6187 and SB 821. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I want to ask you, you made a statement about if you invest in local and state government, it will help create private sector jobs. How, I know it's late, but what's that connection? I'd love to know.
Well, this is just an opinion of mine, but whenever you invest in the public sector, it's because that there's needs there, and private companies will invest in Connecticut, grow jobs, because they know that we have a strong public sector for schools, for our education, for healthcare, that type of thing. So that's the connection I'm trying to make.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
So thank you all for your time, and a long day for all of us. Good night.
Appreciate your testimony. Tom?
Yep. Next up, Andrea. Andrea.
She was here. There she is,
Yeah.
Ms. Flamia. You are on mute.
Hi.
There you are.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. Good evening, Senator Fanfara, Representative Scallion, and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Flamia, and I'm a family support worker for DDS IFS Division. First, what I will say is that we've all heard all the facts and all the figures and all of the suffering that is coming forth. And I will say, before I start, is that we all have a moral obligation as human beings to pay our fair share of taxes to alleviate the suffering of many, many, many families that are happening due to COVID. COVID has taught us anything in the state of Connecticut. So I will say that as a disclaimer before I start my testimony. I am here today to ask you to please pass Senate Bill 821 and House Bill 6187 so that we can raise the revenue to fund family support services, including respite services within DDS, to increase respite opportunities to spread multifaceted services for Connecticut families with people with disabilities that live at home. These increased family support and respite opportunities include expansion of respite care that ranges from re-energizing exhausted caregivers to emergency situations. We have multifaceted respite centers, such as step-down units that deal with psych and emergency situations from the ER. We have long-term respite care centers that help, say, a caregiver get surgery and they have no one to care for their loved one, no one who's trained for the diagnoses and the unique situations of their loved ones. We have respite centers for that. We also have regular respite centers that help families just to hang on. Sometimes there's behaviors that are so severe, that are repetitive, that families just need a little bit of a break, and they're 24/7 taking care of people. So they need that little bit of a break just to kind of carry on for the family member to stay at home. Or if there is a health and safety issue, to make referrals to go to a more appropriate situation. So for the past 30 years, I have worked with people with disabilities. I have witnessed their needs in times of normalcy and times of high stress. I have witnessed families' needs for services that reflect family support services offered by the state of Connecticut DDS that include respite and family support workers as a part of a prevention team. These services ensure that families stay healthy, unified, cohesive, by being able to keep their individual with developmental disabilities at home. These services are crucial in being able to accomplish that goal. For individuals we serve in DDS respite IFS services through family
30
support.
seconds. 30 seconds.
Grace, saving grace for our families. For individuals we serve and, excuse me, Smith, respite provides much needed break for families in many situations. Family support also helps emergency situations and can partner with respite to give families the support they need to avoid escalation of behavioral problems to crisis and placement for health and safety purposes. Thus, the family stays together and avoids the heartbreaking situations of having to place their individual because it's just too much. When COVID hit, families communicated that they needed the support of family support and respite services. We were able to provide medical transportation. We were able to provide virtual medical appointments. We were able to provide virtual
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
stress for the family so that they could stay together. So thank you so much for your time. But I believe that morally, ethically, and financially, we would benefit greatly as a state if we invested in our people with disabilities and their families. For over the long haul, this will not only bring the fabric of unity to the families, but it will also save the state money. So if everybody does their fair share and we support these bills and we pass them, then what happens is suffering ends people are funded, and we can do what we have to do as a state. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Flamia. Really appreciate it. Representative Devlin comes out of nowhere. She has an uncanny way of doing that. You have the floor, madam. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you very much. Just a couple of questions. You've reiterated a couple of times the importance of people paying their fair share. What is a fair share?
Are you talking to me? Yes. The fair share of tax that's in the bills that are presented. And I'm talking from a moral standpoint. I'm talking from, those families that are struggling and can barely pay the rent, and people have disabilities. They also have extra care that has to happen. You have one adult that might be able to work, and one adult that might have to stay home with their person with disabilities, especially during COVID, when a lot of services got cut down. So the fair share, to me, morally, is that if you have an abundance and an overflow, you shouldn't pay less taxes. You should pay the taxes that the percentage of taxes that everybody else has to pay. I'm a middle class person. I have to pay taxes, and when you look at the percentage of my income and the amount of taxes I pay, from what I'm hearing, it's far greater in percentage than someone who has lots of money at the top of the game. So I don't have the facts and figures, but I would say morally, if I see somebody in need and I have an overabundance and I've got loads and loads of money, I would definitely want to alleviate suffering that I see in my face, most definitely.
So no doubt, I appreciate that very much. And actually the situations that you described are very representative in some areas of the districts that I represent. So certainly I empathize with what you're talking about, but what we've heard a lot since 9 o'clock this morning is fair share. And I'm sorry that you're the person I'm asking this of, because it has my mind multiple times throughout the day. So like, what is the fair share? That's just what I want to know, because I would imagine even on these policies, it wouldn't be considered a fair share. So I'm just trying to get to like, what is that?
Right, I understand. And I come from a moral standpoint. If I saw somebody suffering, a family suffering, and I had loads and loads of money, there's no way, even though business-wise it might be better for me, due to the pandemic and 500,000 people dying and all the stuff that's around us. I mean, I've had coworkers die. I've had all kinds of stuff. I've run around to get PPE. I've advocated for PPE. There's just been a lot of stuff that's happened. And so in light of that, I think it's brought us all to a moral standard of opening our eyes and saying, hey, look, we need to do something for recovery for Connecticut, for all of us for Connecticut. So what is that? We need to balance that out. So from a moral standpoint, I would say, if you have a lot, give your fair share. Give what you need to give in order to alleviate the system, you know what I mean? And help us all fund what we need to fund. In our case, it's respite and family support. I've worked in this field for 30 years, and I've seen families hanging on the edge, and we come in and we give them that relief, and they're able to make it. And it saves the state money actually for people to stay home. The individuals, of course, they want to stay home with their families. And of course, it saves a lot of heartache. And then there are times where somebody really needs to be someplace else. And that won't be seen unless we're in the home and we're able to help out the family to say, hey, look, you've done the best you can, but this has become a health and safety issue. Let us safely help you to support you. Not only that, but to bring you into something that's more appropriate. And those need to be funded. We can't do it without the funding. So, yes, business-wise, people are like, yay, business-wise, this works for me. But
30 seconds of the 5-minute question and answer.
All right, so listen, let me ask you another question real quick, because, we are on a timetable. So, and bless you for the work that you do. The work of respite care, I mean, that is huge. And for families that need that break or individuals that need that break, it can't be underestimated. But this bill, both bills actually specify taxes and revenue coming into the state. So what makes you think that that money would actually get to the places that you're talking about?
Well, I'm advocating for it. And I work family support, but I've also been exposed to respite. Family support does a wide array of things, including medical, behavioral. We do so many different things. We wear a lot of hats, and we come in emergency situations as well. But we also feed into respite. But I would advocate for it, and that's what I'm doing now is just say, hey, let me put my voice forth. I don't know if this money is going to get to us, but I'm giving you guys the reasons why it needs to get to us and all the programs where people are suffering in Connecticut. I really think that we really need to understand that, COVID is no respecter of person, and I think that we need to open our eyes to humanity and helping each other out.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And I am sincerely grateful for the work that you do. And I appreciate you spending so much time with us today and to testify and for answering my questions. So thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for asking.
You're not done yet. There you are, Andrea. Representative Zupkis has a question for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Andrea, thank you for coming tonight. And I do appreciate the work that you do. I work with people with intellectual and development disabilities, so I understand some of what you do. So thank you. And Representative Devlin kind of started me thinking and ask a couple of the questions, how do you know where the money's going to go and those types of questions. But I heard you saying, with people with tons and tons of money. And what is that? Because tons of money to somebody is different than tons of money to someone else. So what's your definition of that?
Whatever the bracket is that the bill is targeting, those are the people I'm talking about. So people who have millions of dollars, big business, those people, the bill is targeting as far as taxes are concerned. So those are the people who would be paying their fair share.
Because I know, well, I don't, but I've heard there are people that live in huge houses that have no money. They live outside of their means. Now that's their problem, not mine. But okay, because I think when someone says people have a lot of money, that's all relative. Somebody that has more money than me has a lot of money. So
it's the specific people that the bill is targeting. There's specific people that they're talking about that need to bring forth their fair share, and they have documented millions of dollars. So those are the people I'm talking about.
Okay, and so my last question is, because I don't know this, how do we know that they don't give their money to charity?
Well, they may give them charity, but from what I've heard tonight, and again, I'm coming from a moral standpoint, so forgive my lack of, how shall I say, study of other things, but I've heard other people say the percentages. So, I'm a middle class person, but the amount of taxes I pay are a higher percentage than someone who has millions of dollars and they pay a percentage of taxes. This is what I've heard. Now, do I need to study? Yes. But there are certain people that the bills are talking about and paying forth. Bringing forth charity, that gives them a tax break. If they do donate to charities, maybe those charities are not worldwide charities, or charities that hit every ounce of suffering. In Connecticut, the budget that they're talking about, from what I've seen, that budget is going to cause a lot of suffering to people who are middle and lower class, who don't have money to pay their rent. So
right. I understand. And I know families that are extremely wealthy. One example is a family who took in a young man of color. They were white, took in a man of color, paid for his whole college, paid for everything, and helped him out. So I was just curious. I heard you talking about tons of money, and I think that's relative to people. I know the billionaires and the millionaires, that's a lot of money, but I think that's relative. And I I don't know what people do with their money. And from a moral standpoint, like you, I would say I bet people give and take care of society, because I've personally seen it with people. So I wouldn't put everybody in that category.
Giving and taking care of society.
30 seconds.
On a
30
very
seconds.
limited range. Let me just finish real quick, please. On a very limited range, you can do that. But we're talking about a budget that affects a whole state. So this is a whole state of people who, because of COVID, now are in desperate situations, and especially people with disabilities that can't just freely go, and their parents can freely go and work, and both parents can work, they have to stay home. So you're talking about a whole state, a whole budget. While some people may be able to help some people out on a smaller scale, and maybe even on a little wider of a scale, but we're talking about a whole state of people that are suffering.
Well, I would agree that there are people that are suffering, but I kind of wanted just to put it in perspective that I do think people are generous in general and care about society and care about people that are not as fortunate as them.
I have basically not a whole lot of money, and best believe I go out on the streets and I help people who are homeless. I do a lot of different things that.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flavia. Thank you, Representative Zupkis. Tom?
Thank you so much.
Yep. Carol Christensen.
Carol, there you are.
Good evening, Senator Fanfara and the distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. I'm Carol Christensen, and I'm the president of the Connecticut Association of Realtors, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to testify this evening. The Connecticut Realtors, CTR, is submitting this testimony in strong opposition of SB 171 and SB 172. CTR represents over 17,800 members involved in all aspects of real estate in every municipality in Connecticut. We work with thousands of buyers, sellers, landlords, and tenants every year. SB 171 and 172 both have the purpose of establishing a new statewide tax on commercial and residential real property, and SB 172 is defining the formula based on the percentage of affordable housing developments located in a municipality. CTR strongly opposes this legislation. Property owners throughout Connecticut are already deeply burdened by extremely high property taxes. What Connecticut property owners need is property tax relief, not higher taxes. The pandemic has made a profound impact on incomes for a vast number of Connecticut residents. The money they earn is often needed to pay their mortgage, their insurance, food, medicine, transportation, student loans, local property taxes, car taxes, and other things. Asking these same property owners to now contribute more of their take-home pay to the state means less money available to them for other purposes. This new tax is unfair and it's wrong. There's a serious affordable housing problem in the state, often caused by the inability of people to afford expenses related to home ownership. Taxes are part of that affordability calculation. Homeowners and the ability to build wealth will be put out of reach for even more individuals who don't have this money to contribute to the state annually. A statewide property tax is an annual burden with devastating impact. This new proposed statewide property tax will also discourage businesses from relocating to Connecticut. Relocating businesses often look at housing and commercial real estate costs. The pandemic has shown us that many businesses can move anywhere, and Connecticut continues to make a list of the worst states for taxation. This new taxation will further prove that point. This regressive tax also harms property owners. It leaves the choice to either own a home or to rent. Adding another tax or assessment into the calculation that lenders use to qualify our buyers for a new mortgage can result in dropping that buyer into a lower price point or even out of the housing market entirely. And rental costs will escalate due to the higher taxes, making more rentals less affordable. These proposals ignore the difficulties of mortgage-ready individuals of color that are denied wealth from prior generations from being able to start a path to wealth in high opportunity areas. Higher property taxes or assessments result in less ability to own properties free from deed restrictions that inhibit opportunities for wealth. CTR supports a variety of bills that encourage entry into the housing market, not slowing or stopping it. These include the creation of
30
first-time
seconds.
home buyers
30
savings
seconds.
accounts, incentives for creating affordable housing, efforts to address student debt, the inclusion of affordable market rate properties and rents in the calculation of municipalities meeting affordability calculations. We oppose taxes during construction that makes the ability to build affordable units less feasible. We also support making permanent efficiencies in real estate transactions such as remote notary, expunging certain criminal records, and more. To conclude, CTR strongly requests your rejection of SB 171 and 172. Thank you for your time and your attention to this important matter.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen.
Yeah.
Before we go on to the next slide, I understand that I did not see Representative Farrar's hand up for the last speaker. I apologize. We never not allow a member to speak unless it were Representative Meskers, who's on probation for speaking endlessly last year, but he's working his way out of that gradually. Other than that, you all have a opportunity anytime, and I apologize, Representative Farrar. Tom?
Yep, my fault too. I did not see that. Carol, was that Carol Christensen? Yep, that was you. Okay, so next is James Miller.
All right, I am here. Can you hear me?
Please proceed, Mr. Miller.
Yes, well, thank you for your hard work and staying up late. Co-chairs Fanfara and Scanlon, ranking members Cheeseman and Martin, and the distinguished committee members. I'm here to talk tonight about a technical point on SB 172. I'm a member of Lyme's Affordable Housing Commission, and we all agree, and I work personally hard to make sure that we have a serious conversation about affordable housing. But I think we also have to agree that bad data would make bad policy. SB 172 bases Connecticut tax policy on the 830G definition of affordable housing with a capital A. However, this definition is a fictional construct, and it doesn't recognize the reality of housing conditions in Connecticut's towns and cities. In fact, no one knows how much actual affordable housing exists in Connecticut or where it's located. Capital A affordable housing based on 830G must be constructed after 1990. This absolutely makes no sense given the tens of thousands of people in Connecticut that live safely and comfortably in houses built as far back as the 17th and 18th centuries and 19th centuries. Second, rental units must be deed restricted or financed with public programs. These definitions leave out innumerable uncounted units of affordable housing all over the state. My personal experience includes the fact my oldest son rented an apartment on Afghanistan Avenue in Bridgeport for a couple of years. The home was immaculate, but it was built in the 1940s or 50s and thus not capital A affordable, even though the rent was $650 a month. Likewise, a neighbor of mine rents a garage apartment for $1,100 a month recently to a young teacher at our local middle school. This is also not capital A affordable housing because the property is not deed restricted. Deed restrictions are probably fine with developers putting up 830G complexes, but they don't work for small landlords. Last month, our Affordable Housing Commission polled the owners of all accessory units in our town to see if they'd be willing to put deed restrictions on their properties in order to become capital A affordable units. We got less than 10% response to our letters, and only one owner suggested that they might consider putting on a deed restriction. For SB 172 and all other legislation connected with capital A affordable housing, we need to modify our definition to reflect the rents actually charged on properties in the state and to understand what's truly affordable. We need to identify all affordable housing, not just deed restricted and not just built after 1990, based on actual rents in the
30
market.
seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
Not on a fictional construct. Once we have good data, we can make a good policy. There's absolutely no question that affordable housing is a important and an emotional and critical issue for Connecticut. But let's just do this correctly instead of using a made-up definition. Thank you for your time and your service in addressing these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Representative Cheeseman has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Miller, for raising those very important points. I was on a call earlier this evening with Salem, their Economic Development Commission, and their planning and zoning, and they brought up that very point. The arbitrary cutoff date in terms of 1990, and there goes the dog, for housing. Also, the deed restrictions. So can you address what you would like to see going forward? Because obviously having people have the ability to live where they want is vital, but we've created these barriers.
Yeah, so what I think we should do is we should have the State Housing Commission or some other authority do a survey of all of the property in Connecticut and find out what the actual market rents are. You know, there are services like Zillow, the real estate brokers have their own databases. The data is there, it's not hard to collect, and we should base our affordable housing, not the formulas are okay in terms of the percentage of income that people should spend on their housing, but we need to match that with the actual market rents that exist in the market. And then once we have that data, we now will actually know what is affordable, what's not affordable, and where it's located, and then we can have the policy discussion. But as I said, for small landlords, nobody's going to sign a deed restriction unless you put a gun to their head. And that's the experience we had in our town trying to get people to do it.
So to really move forward, one, we need that good data, and then once we have that, go from there and have a realistic view of what constitutes affordable housing.
Exactly my point.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a big thank you to Jim. Thank you for always having good facts and rational thinking, and I really appreciate you staying up and being here to testify tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yep.
See, no others, Tom?
Yep, we have Jameem Davis, followed by Gail Black.
Ms. Davis.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, and distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Jameem Davis. I'm the Vice President and Co-Director of Bridgeport Generation Now, which is a grassroots member-based organization with over 300 members. At Gen Now, we build collective power by strengthening civic engagement in ourselves and our communities. And we use the tools of community organizing to dismantle systemic racism and corruption so that we can build a just, equitable, livable city and state. We are also part of the Recovery for All Coalition. I'm testifying to strongly support HB 6187 and SB 821. In July of 2019, our Public Safety and Police Accountability Committee held a space where community members gave testimony on their experience with violence and misconduct with the Bridgeport Police Department. At this forum, a mother spoke deeply about the fear she has for the safety of her 18-year-old Black son who has autism. She was concerned about how officers would deal with her son who, she says, has invisible disabilities and can be combative and non-compliant. We know her fears are justified. The deaths of Daniel Prude, Patrick Warren Sr., and Mubarak Suleiman, who was killed by a Connecticut state trooper, show us that armed police responses to mental health and substance abuse crises can end in tragedy. To transform our society and create a system of public safety that keeps us all safe, we must shift our perspectives, our policy making, and how we fund our budgets. It's time to look at public safety through a public health lens and make strong investments in addressing the root causes of community violence, like mental health, substance abuse, underperforming schools, high housing costs, lack of health care, and much more. Bridgeport currently has no structural mechanism in place for people needing mental health services when the police are called. With this progressive revenue proposed in HB 6187 and SB 821, we can fully fund the Department of Mental Health and Mobile Crisis Intervention Services, making them available 24/7.
30 seconds, Ms. Davis, 30 seconds.
Dispatching trained mental health professionals to all 911 mental health calls instead of having armed police answer the calls. Whether it's the STAR program in Denver or Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, cities and states across this country are creating public health responses to community needs that do not involve the police. This is a good thing, but building a new system requires serious commitment and investment at the state level. That is why we support these two bills, which will raise revenue equitably to meet the needs of this moment.
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'll just end there. But thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's been a long day and a long night, so thank you so much.
And we're glad you stayed up for us, Ms. Davis.
Yes.
I see Senator Moore has a question for you.
Not necessarily, but a comment. But I want to thank Janine for the work that she does in Bridgeport and pulling people together. We hear so many negative stories about Bridgeport, but this is one of the shining lights that we have that works with a lot of different community organizers and trying to lift up our community. So I appreciate you staying up this late to give testimony. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore.
Thank you, Senator.
Yep.
Seeing no one, none others.
Yep. Next up, we have Amy O'Connor.
Oh, hi. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Zach Levy. I'm the legislative coordinator for AFSCME Council 4. I'm going to read the testimony for Ruby Blackman, who was the 14th speaker today, but had a medical emergency and was able to speak. But first of all, I want to thank Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and members of the Finance Committee for taking the time to allow this tonight. I know that this has been
Zach,
a very long hearing.
Zach, just so we understand, Zach, before you proceed, Amy O'Connor is who signed up. That's
she is the chief of staff for Council 4. She had to take a leave. Therefore, as the legislative coordinator, is that okay with the committee? I would like to read Ruby's.
That's fine. Just wanted to understand if we're going to be seeing her at some point or not, but it looks like we're going to be.
So I'm reading the testimony for Ruby Blackman, who lives in New Britain, Connecticut, and is the president of AFSCME Local 196. They represent state administrative and clerical workers in several state agencies, including Yukon Health, Central Connecticut University, and DCF DSS, among others. She also serves on the executive board of Council 4. Council 4 is a union representing 30,000 public and private employees. Here tonight to speak in favor of HB 6107 and SB 821. Earlier today, the State Employee Bargaining Agent Coalition released a report called Austerity versus Reinvestment, which offers a roadmap for creating a real economic recovery that benefits all Connecticut citizens, not just the richest residents, the ultra wealthy, and the elites in Connecticut, among the largest corporations as well. This report speaks to the need for passing HB 6187 and SB 821. Connecticut is among the wealthiest states in the country, yet has become alarmingly unequal when it comes to income and race. This concerns me as a working class person, and as Ruby has said in their testimony, which is submitted, it concerns her as a working class Black woman as well. Together, these bills would steer us away from the failed model of austerity in favor of reinvesting in our communities. This would be accomplished through a reasonable and small surtax on our wealthiest citizens and the elites who live in this state, along with increases in the tax rate for large profitable corporations and individuals making more than $1 million per year. Passing these bills is the right and fair thing to do. COVID-19 has taken the lives of more than 7,500 residents in our state, as well as 500,000 people across America. It's put good people out of work. It has made frontline workers and vulnerable populations stand on the front lines and continue to provide services as the wealthiest have added value to their portfolios and become billionaires and trillionaires, nearly trillionaires, as our members have stand on the front lines. More than anything, COVID-19 has exposed the underlying problems related to race and inequality in our state. We can't simply cut our way out of the harm done to us by our austerity budgets from the past and COVID-19. But we can reinvest in public services and structure a better Connecticut for everyone. I strongly urge the committee, as well as Ruby, to support working families in Connecticut by passing HB 6187 and SB 821. I know that before several members had questions for another member of another union, but I, as somebody who is a legislative representative for my union, am more than happy and willing to answer questions from anyone on the committee. I really hope that we will be able to pass these bills, and thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for allowing me to read this testimony on Ruby's behalf.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Ruby. I see no hands up.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sharon Thorntonson, if she is here. Sharon? And if not, we have Lynn Ide.
Lynn's got to be here.
Yeah, they're both in. Oh, here's Lynn.
There she is. Hi,
Good
Lynn.
evening, everybody. Nice to see you, Senator Fonfara.
Nice to see you, Lynn.
Representative Scanlon and the rest of the committee. And looking at the hour, I'm fortunate that you get to hear from an Ides on the Ides of March before the day is over. I'm here to urge this committee to meet the moment and take bold action on revenue this session. We must invest in the health and care of our families, small employers, and hardworking people. A true recovery for all is the prescription we need now. And our state residents are looking to you to do your part to protect and improve the quality of life for all of us, not just some of us. The past year has put in stark relief the enormous gaps in equity, access, quality, and affordability in our healthcare system. The pandemic has further exposed the longstanding need for our state to play a positive role in making sure that no person is left behind. More than ever, it is crystal clear that good health and equity and access to quality, affordable healthcare are essential to our state's well-being and recovery. If people are not healthy, they cannot contribute to our economy. Why should we invest in healthcare to promote equity and recovery? Well, there are huge gaps in life expectancy between people of color and white residents, and they're exacerbated by poor access to healthcare. Black, Latinx, and non-citizen residents with low and moderate incomes are most likely to be uninsured. Husky A and D enrollment grew by 11.5% in 2020, close to 85,000 people, reflecting unemployment caused by the pandemic. And too many small businesses, the drivers of our economy here in Connecticut, lack access to quality healthcare options for their employees. So if we expand revenue, our state could do more to help. We could begin to address the social determinants of health by investing in housing, education, and many other areas. We could extend Husky to all residents up to 201% of the federal poverty level, regardless of immigration status. We could enhance subsidies for those buying their own health insurance on the exchange. And we could use the buying power of the state to help create new quality options for small businesses, nonprofits, and labor unions, allowing them to escape the cycle of unpredictable cost and affordability. HB 6187 and SB 821 provide our state with a diverse range of options that will move us out of the austerity frame and into a frame that looks to a better future with equitable opportunity extended to the people you were elected to serve. And finally, I just want to say, this legislation builds a ladder that rests upon a more diverse and fair revenue foundation. Your bold action will help our state climb out of this pandemic with sound opportunity for a better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. It's good to see you. No questions.
No question.
Tom.
Yep, Edwin Camp.
Mr. Camp.
Hey, good evening to Senator Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and the distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee for holding this hearing. I really appreciate that you are all up so late at night and have hosted such a powerful hearing today. My name is Eddie Camp. I am here to support HB 6187, SB 21, and SB 171. I live in New Haven, where I work for Unite Here Local 34. I'm also a member of New Haven Rising, and I was a member of Unite Here Local 33 for 7 years. Inequality in a city like New Haven is even starker when comparing a city like New Haven to a city like Greenwich. In fact, it is probably difficult to find a state or province anywhere in the world that has so much poverty among so much wealth. The Opportunity Atlas is a tool that I often use to understand inequality. It's a fantastic tool to understand inequality. And what it does is it shows the median outcomes of people that are basically in their 30s now who grew up in specific neighborhoods. So for example, from that atlas, you can see that a Black individual who grew up in the New Haven neighborhood of The Hill earns a median annual income of only $25,000. This individual would have to work for over 100,000 years, not spending a single penny, and this person would still not amass as much wealth as many of the billionaires in Connecticut. If Connecticut lawmakers expect a person making $25,000 to make ends meet, why don't they expect that a billionaire could get by on slightly less? The wealthiest in our state, they have to be better partners for working to close the gap of incredible inequality that we see in Connecticut. Now is the time for Connecticut to be taking actions that rectify inequality rather than allow it to deepen. This is all the more urgent because we know that the experiences of this crisis have already been so unequal. During this crisis, I have worked with many union members who have lost their jobs and are struggling to pay for rent and groceries. Passing worker recall would be a major step towards helping these families, but these families also need resources now. They need a city and state services that can help them get back on their feet. Even when they get back on their feet, they need better funded schools, more youth programs, better public transportation, and many other services that will help working people have a basic economic security, hope, and opportunity. Many other members in our union are actually essential workers. Some have contracted COVID-19 on the job, and others have risked getting COVID as they have kept our universities, medical centers, and hotels running. They've done this even while juggling care for dependents and children who are oftentimes learning remotely. Many of these workers are also struggling with income loss as they've seen significant reductions in their hours.
30 seconds, sir, 30 seconds.
Thank you. This experience is fundamentally different from the experience of the wealthiest in our state. Unlike those facing layoffs or those on the front lines, the wealthiest have often worked remotely in comfortable home offices. And many of them have even increased their wealth while relying on essential workers who are facing risk every day. Now, as we recover, we must insist on a just recovery. We must have a just recovery for all that enhances equality and dignity rather than deepening suffering and widening the shameful wealth gap that has existed in our state for far too long. Thank you again, and I really appreciate all of you staying up so late to hear all of our testimony.
We appreciate you, Mr. Camp.
Yep.
I see no questions. Tom.
Senator Gary Winfield.
Senator Winfield.
Good evening.
There you are.
Yes.
Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see all of you. Good evening to all of you. Hopefully, since I'm 327, you're almost at the end. I'm not going to come with the numbers and all of that. I'm just going to give you my perspective why I support 6187 and 821. And I support them both for the same reason. And I'm going to take you back to earlier in the pandemic. I had a constituent who I missed her email. And I don't know how I came across her email, but when I did, I gave her a call. And she said to me, "Thank God you called me," because she felt like government wasn't responsive to her. And I'm sure some of you have had this very same conversation. She felt like she couldn't get an answer to her questions. And all of this stuff was piling on her because she wasn't able to work anymore. She wasn't able to pay her bills, and nobody was listening. And she said to me, "I was about to kill myself." That's what she said to me. And I don't know why I found her email on the day I found it, but I was afraid to get off that telephone call because I didn't want that woman to kill herself. And the reason why it was so important to me is because I've felt that before myself. 20 plus years ago, I was a young husband, and I've told the story of sitting on a pile of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, and how that got me to the next paycheck. I'm not sure that pile of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters that I picked up along the way and put into a jar would get me to the next paycheck right now. The reason I support this is because that notion of a rising tide floating all boats just isn't right. I heard that earlier. I've been listening all day. Because we don't all have a boat, because some of us who have a boat that's not structurally sound, and because we just don't live in the same conditions. We didn't come to this moment the same way. I don't have a lot to tell you. I just can tell you that there are people who are suffering. There are people who, when we talk about a rising tide, they are struggling just to stay afloat. And look, it's not a rising tide because the gravity is pulling at the waters. It's a rising tide because it's pouring in the lives of people. There are people standing on the shore whose houses are drowning, right? This is what we're talking about. And if we approach this moment in the way that we've been approaching every moment to this point, we're wrong. We have been in this building, at least I have, for many years, struggling to do what we've already been doing, because it's been more of the pie has been a piece of something that we couldn't change, because the cost of things keep increasing no matter what you do. We have been struggling to meet the moment. We've been saying, we'll cut the probate cost so that we can do it, even though the offset for that is so astronomical that that's insane. We have said the shooting task force, the disparity study, and I could go down a list of things that we do not do. We cannot do, because we want to operate the way that we've been operating, so we can go and say, hey, we're being responsible. But being responsible also takes into account what's actually happening. Listen, I'll end this really soon. When you can't do what you have been doing, you can't do the extra that you need to do. You can't make up for what you have to do in order to do the things we say we want to do right now. We keep talking equity. Equity requires revenue.
30 seconds.
I got it. Equity requires revenue. If we're going to have that conversation, if we're going to have the conversations about what's happened in COVID, then we need revenue. And whether it's this bill or some other form of the bill, it's what we absolutely need to do as a legislature. So thank you for being here. It's toughing it out. I know what it's like. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Senator Winfield, and always appreciate your perspective. Are there questions?
Yes, Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Winfield, for your testimony. Well, Senator Winfield, you mentioned disparity study. What's the importance of a disparity study?
So the disparity study tells us where it tells us about the disparity in the state. It's a legal accounting for what the disparity in the state is. And when we want to talk about the set aside programs we have and whether or not they stand up legally in the courts that we have, we need a study to undergird that. And our study hasn't been conducted in decades. We had an opportunity to do it about a decade and a half ago. As you may know, Representative Miller, I done some work on it, and then I won't get into how it got messed up, but it did. And you know, we were talking about $3 million at that time to do the disparity study to fundamentally change the lives of many of the people in our state, and we couldn't find the money to do that. That should tell you something. People who we talk about all the time when it's convenient to talk about people who are existing on the wrong end of the economic scale, who are on the wrong side of the equity equation. We couldn't find $3 million that we need to find, that nobody disagrees we need to find. We need the revenue.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
So if we had the disparity study, what do you think, how would it affect racial impact or racial equity, excuse me?
I think it would have a positive impact on racial equity. It would redefine what the set-asides are, would redefine what our goals are as a state in a way that I think many of us believe but cannot prove that we should have those goals defined. And I mean, look, just the definition of the goal doesn't mean we're going to meet it. We've been fighting that fight too, but we certainly as a state should know where we should be, and they shouldn't be looking at the numbers we had 20, 25 years ago.
I thank you for your answer, and thank you again for the fight that you've led since we were freshmen in the General Assembly 12 years ago, 13 years ago, you know, fighting for racial justice and criminal justice. And I really appreciate it because it's not an easy fight. So thank you again for staying up this late to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Miller.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator.
Yep.
Tom?
Emmett O'Keefe. If Emmett is here.
There he
Good
is.
here.
Mr.
Good
O'Keefe.
evening. All right, thank you very much. Good evening, Chairman Fonfara, Representative Scanlon, ranking members Martin and Cheeseman, and all the distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I applaud you for your perseverance and stamina and for going through this entire day. And thank you for allowing me to be part of it. My name is Emmett O'Keefe. I'm head of public affairs for Booking Holdings, Priceline, and Kayak. I'm here this evening to speak in opposition to specific proposals in SB 821 and HB 6187 to create a new tax on digital advertising. As you may know, Booking Holdings, Priceline, and Kayak are leading providers of online travel services, and all three are homegrown technology companies based here in Connecticut, with Booking Holdings and Priceline headquartered in Norwalk and Kayak based in Stamford. I'm here today because marketing and advertising are key to the services we provide, key to enabling consumers to be able to compare prices, reserve hotel rooms, flights, rental cars, and tables at restaurants across the state. In fact, more than 400 Connecticut hotels currently partner with us to help them find customers from around the world. Marketing and advertising is key to driving business to those hotels. As everyone knows, this has been a difficult year for the travel and hospitality sector, with studies showing that nearly 40% of all pandemic-related job losses coming from the travel and hospitality industry. Given this dynamic, we believe that now is not the time, as this sector is trying to recover, to impose new taxes on the travel and tourism industry by increasing the cost of advertising. This especially holds true for hotels and small B&Bs, which already are subject to Connecticut's occupancy tax as well. Additionally, the lack of clarity in these proposals leads to significant concerns because it's frankly just difficult to evaluate the effects without more specificity. So in conclusion, we are concerned about these proposals to adopt a new tax on digital advertising because of the negative impact it would have on Connecticut consumers and businesses, and we urge you to reject these specific provisions. Thank you again for allowing me to be here today. I appreciate you taking our concerns into account. Wish you the best in the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. Seeing no questions, Tom?
Yep. Last but not least, Manny Santos. He's actually last on the entire list.
Mr. Santos.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Again, good evening, committee members. My name is Manny Santos. I'm a Connecticut taxpayer, an engineer, an analyst, and former mayor of Meriden. More taxes does not equate to a more affordable state. We deserve to keep more of what we earn. Everyone with a head on their shoulders knows that Connecticut taxpayers are overtaxed. This is not debatable. Every reputable national metric proves this. What also cannot be denied is that our cities are in distress due to mismanagement of our current tax dollars. And in fact, in some politicians more worried about getting reelected than they are about fixing our problems. Now, SB 171, which establishes the statewide property tax, will do nothing to correct the reckless spending by city and state officials. What it will do is take more money from hardworking, successful taxpayers in the suburbs and give it to the cities and other municipalities that have already proven to be terrible stewards of tax money. This is the same tax and spend idea that has failed Connecticut cities for decades, except that now, instead of raising local property taxes, you are raising property taxes statewide at a time when we need jobs to rev up our economy. We cannot attract businesses and workers when the solution to government mismanagement is always higher taxes. More taxes does not work.
Now, speaking of work, SB 172, which encourages affordable housing, I want to talk about that a little bit, and I am in opposition to it. This is no more than a gimmick to strong arm suburbs and cities into building more affordable housing. Have we bothered to ask why Connecticut needs so much affordable housing? Maybe because it's no longer affordable to live in this state because of too many regulations on job creating businesses and too many taxes. Stop making it so darn hard to live and work in Connecticut, and the problem of housing affordability will solve itself. When I was in office, I fought to stop more affordable housing because that only addresses the symptom, not the root cause. After building hundreds of additional
30
apartments,
seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
Meriden is no better off because we still lack businesses to employ people, and our median income is now lower, further reducing the likelihood of attracting jobs. It's a lack of job opportunities that has led some to conclude a need for better access to housing. Stop attempting to do the same thing, expecting different results. Make Connecticut more affordable, reduce state spending, reduce taxes, reduce regulations. I urge opposition to SB 171 and 172. I urge every taxpayer to tell your representative and senator to stop raising taxes. And I thank you, committee members, for taking the time to consider my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos. Representative Devlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Santos, thanks so much for hanging with us. I think you may be the last person in our hearing today. So thank you for your testimony. I'm not going to address your comments or thoughts regarding affordable housing. You might want to tune into the Planning and Development Committee, which will probably be going on for a few days in that public hearing that's addressing all sorts of issues related to that and state control of local zoning. But I did want to address or ask you some questions related to the comment you made about that citizens deserve to keep more of what they earn, and that the idea of creating affordability or the lower costs in our state, because we've been hearing a lot of testimony that the solution is we need to take more money from people who have it and give it out to others because that will help raise everybody, and that would be the solution to being able to live and afford to live in our state. So do you want to comment on that any further?
Well, I think I said most of just to expand what got us to this, to where we are right now with the need for so much affordable housing is in fact the lack of job opportunities, the lack of career opportunities. And that can be directly linked to the business environment in this state that continues to be a challenge. And that's because of our public policy, and it's because of predominantly high regulations and high taxes.
No, I do appreciate that. I tend to agree that creating an environment where businesses will come and grow and provide job opportunities will be a strong solution to returning our state to what it once was. But I do appreciate your testimony, and just wanted to have an opportunity to hear a little bit further about your comments about keeping more of what you've earned. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Devlin. And thank you, Mr. Santos. And I believe, Tom, that concludes testimony for this evening.
We have nobody in the waiting room, and he's the last one. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for hanging in there today. I know that you've been incredible in your dedication. Want to thank the committee administrator and Christina as well for supporting us throughout this day, keeping us on the straight and narrow. I don't know if we have anything. Are we on for Wednesday, Tom, as well?
Yeah, we have a hearing on Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Hopefully we can have a shorter day that day. And I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good night, Mr. Chair.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Chair.
Good night, everybody.